I said goodbye to my dying husband in the hospital. Then I overheard a conversation that changed everything. I'm sitting on this cold metal bench just outside the main doors of St. Aurora Medical Center, the kind of bench that's been painted and repainted so many times the green is peeling in thin curls. My fingers are wrapped around a paper cup of hospital coffee that's gone stone cold. I haven't taken a single sip. I can still smell the bitter steam that rose from it 20 minutes ago, but now it's just another thing I'm holding on to because I don't know what else to do with my hands. The automatic doors whoosh open and shut behind me every few minutes. Families coming, families going, doctors in scrubs hurrying past with clipboards and tired eyes. Inside, the fluorescent lights are too bright. The hallways too quiet except for the steady mechanical beep, beep, beep drifting out from the ICU wing like a heartbeat that isn't quite human anymore. That sound follows me even out here. It's the soundtrack to the worst moment of my life, and I can't turn it off. Evan is in there, my Evan, the man who used to wake up before me just so he could make the coffee exactly the way I like it. 2 sugars, a splash of oat milk, stirred counterclockwise because he said it felt right. Now machines are breathing for him. His chest rises and falls in perfect artificial rhythm. But his hand in mine earlier today felt like cool silk over bone. I kept waiting for his fingers to curl around mine the way they always did. That small, unconscious squeeze that said, "I'm still here, Clara. I've got you." But nothing came, just stillness. I keep replaying the doctor's face from this afternoon. He was young, probably only a few years older than me, but his eyes were ancient. He stood in the doorway of the consultation room, white coat wrinkled, stethoscope dangling like an afterthought. "Mrs. Hayes," he said, voice low and careful, the way people talk when they're delivering news they wish they didn't have to deliver. "Your husband's condition has deteriorated significantly. The bone marrow is failing faster than we anticipated. We're doing everything we can, but we're gonna need a miracle." A miracle. I almost laughed. Right there in the room, a dry, broken sound caught in my throat. A miracle? We've never had miracles. We've had each other, and that was supposed to be enough. We never had kids. We tried. God. We tried. 3 rounds of IVF that left me bruised inside and out. Calendars marked with blood tests and injection days. Hope shrinking a little more with every negative result. In the end, we stopped counting failures and started counting the ways we could still be happy. Just the 2 of us. A little house on the edge of town, weekend drives up to the ridge to watch the sun set over the pines, quiet dinners where he'd reach across the table and brush his thumb over my knuckles like I was something precious. Evan was orphaned at 4. No siblings on record, no distant cousins who ever came looking. The system swallowed him whole and spit him out at 18 with a duffel bag and a social security number. He built his life from scratch, worked double shifts at the auto shop, saved every penny. I learned how to fix anything with an engine or a broken heart. He fixed mine without even trying. And now the one thing he can't fix is himself. I stare at the parking lot lights flickering against the dark glass of the hospital. Cars come and go. A woman in a hoodie walks past pushing an empty wheelchair, tears streaming silently down her face. I wonder if she's coming from the same floor I just left. I wonder if she's praying for the same impossible thing. My phone sits face down on the bench beside me. I haven't checked it in hours. There's no one left to call. No parents, no brothers, no best friend who hasn't already texted, "I'm so sorry" a dozen times and doesn't know what else to say. It's just me out here in the cold November air, breath fogging in little clouds, trying to convince myself that if I sit still enough, and if I don't move, maybe time will freeze and he won't slip any further away. But time doesn't listen. The beeps keep coming. The doors keep whooshing. And somewhere inside those walls, the man who taught me what home feels like is fighting a war I can't fight for him. All I can do is sit here on this stupid bench, holding cold coffee and a prayer that feels thinner every second, begging the universe for one last kindness. Just one. Please. I close my eyes sometimes and I can still see him exactly the way he was before the sickness stole the color from his skin. Evan Hayes, my Evan, was unbreakable. Not in some loud, chest-thumping, action movie way. No, he was the quiet kind of strong. The kind that didn't need to prove anything to anybody except maybe me. And even then, he never tried too hard. He just was. I every morning started the same, like clockwork wrapped in sunlight. He'd wake up 5 minutes before the alarm, always did, and slip out of bed without making a sound. I'd pretend to stay asleep just so I could feel the mattress dip when he came back with 2 mugs of coffee. Black for him, 2 sugars and a splash of oat milk for me, stirred counterclockwise because he swore it tasted better that way. He'd set my mug on the nightstand, lean down, and press the softest kiss against my temple. "Morning, beautiful," he'd murmur, voice still thick with sleep. Then he'd launch into the dumbest, most perfect dad joke he could think of at 6:30 a.m. "Why don't skeletons fight each other?" I'd groan into the pillow. "Not because they don't have the guts." And I'd laugh, every single time, because the ridiculousness of it coming from this 6'2" man with engine grease still under his fingernails was somehow the best part of waking up. He worked at the auto shop on Maple Street, the one with the faded red sign that read Hayes and Sons, even though there were never any sons and never would be. He didn't mind. He loved the work, loved the smell of motor oil and rubber, the clang of tools, the satisfaction of coaxing a dead engine back to life. His hands were rough, calluses thick across his palms, knuckles scarred from years of wrenches slipping. But when those same hands touched me, they turned gentle, almost reverent. He'd wrap his arms around me from behind while I was washing dishes, chin resting on my shoulder, and whisper, "Clara, well, you're my whole damn world, you know that?" I'd roll my eyes and tell him he was cheesy. He'd just grin against my neck. Guilty, but I mean it. Evan wasn't flashy. He didn't own a single tailored suit, didn't care about brand names or status. His idea of dressing up was swapping the oil-stained Carhartt for a clean flannel on date night, but he had this way of making ordinary things feel sacred. Saturday mornings, we'd drive up to the ridge overlooking Redwood Valley, windows down, old country playlist on low, and he'd pull over at the same turnout every time just to watch the fog lift off the pines. "Look at that," he'd say, like we hadn't seen it 100 times before. Brand new day, brand new sky. Then he'd spread out the blanket in the truck bed, unpack sandwiches he'd made the night before, peanut butter and banana for me, on turkey and cheddar for him. And we'd lie there for hours talking about nothing and everything. Dreams we still hadn't chased, places we wanted to see. The life we were building one small, perfect moment at a time. He healed things, cars, people, me. When my mom died and the grief felt like it would swallow me whole, he didn't try to fix it with words. He just sat with me on the porch swing until 3 in the morning, letting me cry until there was nothing left. When I raged at the universe for giving us 3 failed IVFs and no answers, he never once made me feel broken. He'd pull me close and say, "We're enough, Clara. Just you and me. We're the family I always wanted." And somehow, he made me believe it. He loved old movies, black and white ones with crackly soundtracks, and rainy Sunday afternoons when we'd curl up on the couch under the same quilt, his heartbeat steady under my ear. He loved thunderstorms, the smell of fresh-cut grass, the way I sang off-key in the shower. He loved life the way some people only love it in movies, fully, without apology, without holding anything back. And now he's lying in that sterile ICU bed, tubes and wires mapping every fragile breath, skin pale as paper, and I can't reconcile the 2 versions of him. The man who used to lift me onto the kitchen counter just to kiss me properly. The man who laughed so hard at his own terrible jokes that tears came to his eyes. The man who made me believe the world could still be good. How do you let go of someone like that? How do you wake up every day knowing the person who taught you what safe felt like might not wake up at all? I don't know how to do it. I don't know if I can. All I know is that every memory of him healthy, of him alive and laughing and whole, cuts deeper than the last. Because the sharper the memory, the more impossible it feels that I could lose him. He was my reason, my proof that life could be kind. And if he goes, I don't know what proof I'll have left. The first time the hematologist said the words out loud, it felt like someone had sucked all the air out of the small consultation room. Aplastic anemia, he called it, severe, idiopathic, rare. In plain English, Evan's bone marrow had simply stopped working, stopped producing the blood cells he needed to stay alive. Red cells, white cells, platelets, everything was dropping. And day by day, like sand slipping through an hourglass we couldn't flip over. His body was quietly, methodically destroying itself from the inside out, one failing stem cell at a time. I remember sitting there gripping the armrests of the cheap vinyl chair so hard my knuckles turned white, trying to make the words bounce off me instead of sink in. The doctor, Dr. Patel, kind eyes behind wire-rimmed glasses, kept his voice steady, clinical, the way they're trained to do when they know the news is going to shatter someone. We've ruled out every environmental trigger we can test for. No toxins, no recent viral infections we can pinpoint, no family history. He trailed off there because there was no family history, not one scrap of paper with a parent's name. Mine Evan had been 4 when the state placed him in foster care after a car accident. No one survived. The file ended with unidentified remains for his parents and no known relatives. That was it. 30 years of nothing. The only curative option at this stage is a stem cell transplant, bone marrow transplant, Dr. Patel continued. We need a matched donor. A sibling is ideal. Best chance of a close HLA match. Without that, he didn't finish the sentence. He didn't have to. The silence did it for him. I looked across the desk at Evan. He was still trying to smile for me, that small, crooked half smile he used when he was scared but didn't want me to see it. His skin already looked wrong, too pale, almost translucent under the fluorescent lights, and the bruising on his forearms from where the nurses had drawn blood looked like dark fingerprints pressed into dough. He reached over and squeezed my knee under the table. "We'll figure it out, Clara," he said quietly. "We always do." But we didn't. Not this time. We spent the next weeks in a blur of tests and treatments that were never meant to cure, only to buy time. Blood transfusions every few days because his hemoglobin kept crashing. Platelet infusions when the bruises spread like spilled ink across his chest and legs. Growth factors injected into his stomach that left him nauseated and aching but didn't restart the marrow. Antibiotics on standby because even a cold could turn deadly now that his immune system was collapsing. Every needle prick, every bag of blood hanging above his bed, every sterile room, they all screamed the same thing: delay, not deliverance. I sat beside his hospital bed for hours at a time, holding his hand. His fingers used to be strong enough to lift engine blocks. Now they trembled when he tried to lace them through mine. The skin on the back of his hand was paper thin, veins standing out blue and fragile. I'd trace them with my thumb, memorizing the map of him, terrified that one day soon there wouldn't be anything left to trace. "Fight, baby," I'd whisper against his knuckles, tears soaking the thin hospital blanket. "You have to fight. I can't do this without you. I don't know how to be me without you." He'd squeeze back weakly, eyes half closed from the morphine they gave him for the bone pain that woke him up screaming some nights. "I'm trying, Clara," he'd rasp. "I'm trying so damn hard." But trying wasn't enough. The transplant team ran his HLA typing, those little genetic markers that decide whether a donor's cells will attack or accept him. They put his profile on the national registry, sent it to every bone marrow database they could. Days passed, then weeks. No matches. Not a single partial match. No cousins, no half-siblings, no miracle distant relative who'd taken a cheek swab on a whim. The coordinator called me into a side room one afternoon while Evan was napping. She spoke gently, like she was sorry for every word. Without a matched unrelated donor or a family member, the odds drop dramatically. We can keep him stable for a while with supportive care, but the disease is progressive. I'm so sorry. I walked back to his room in a daze. The hallway smelled like bleach and old coffee. Someone's dinner tray clattered somewhere down the corridor. Life kept moving for everyone else, and mine was stopping. I crawled onto the narrow hospital bed beside him, careful of the IV lines, the oxygen tubing, the monitor wires, and curled against his side. He stirred, cracked one eye open. "Hey," he murmured. "You okay?" I shook my head against his shoulder. Tears slipped sideways into his hospital gown. "I'm losing you," I said, voice cracking open. and there's nothing I can do to stop it. He lifted his free hand, the one without the PICC line, and rested it on my hair. "You're not losing me yet," he whispered. "Not yet." But deep down, in the quiet part of my heart that no one else could reach, I knew the truth. We were in a dead-end street. No donor, no miracle, no way out. This disease wasn't just killing him cell by cell. It was carving pieces out of me too. Hope, faith, the future we'd planned in quiet moments on the porch swing. Every time his numbers dropped, every time the alarms beeped because his heart rate dipped too low, another piece of my soul went with it. I lay there listening to the mechanical beep, beep, beep of the monitor counting what was left of his life. And I begged whatever was listening, God, the universe, fate, anything, for one door to open. Just one. Because if it didn't, I didn't know how to keep breathing once his stopped. I still remember the exact moment I first saw Evan across that tiny coffee shop on Maple Street. It was late October, the kind of gray afternoon where the rain can't decide if it wants to fall or just hang in the air like regret. I was sitting alone at the corner table nearest the window, staring into a latte that had gone cold 20 minutes earlier, trying to pretend I wasn't crying. Again, the third IVF cycle had ended in failure 2 weeks before. Another negative test, another phone call from the clinic that started with, "I'm sorry." Another piece of hope chipped away until I felt hollowed out. I'd told myself I was done. Done hoping. Done hurting. Done believing anyone could ever want me when my own body kept saying no. I didn't notice him at first. He was just another guy in a flannel shirt ordering black coffee to go. But then he turned, caught my eye for half a second too long, and instead of looking away politely like most people do when they see someone falling apart in public, he walked over. "Mind if I sit?" he asked, voice low and easy, like he was asking about the weather instead of intruding on my private wreckage. I shrugged. I didn't have the energy to say no. He sat, didn't push, just sipped his coffee and watched the rain streak the glass for a while. After maybe 5 minutes of silence, he said, "Rough day?" I laughed. A short, bitter sound. "Rough life." He nodded like he understood, then asked the question no one else had ever asked without pity in their voice. "Want to tell me about it, or would you rather we just sit here and hate the rain together?" I told him. Everything. The diagnosis of unexplained infertility. The hormone shots that made me feel like a stranger in my own skin. The ultrasounds, the egg retrievals, the embryo transfers that never took. The way each failure made me feel less like a woman, less like someone worth loving. I told him how I'd started avoiding baby showers, how I'd stopped looking at families in the grocery store because it hurt too much. I told him I was pretty sure I was broken beyond repair. He listened, really listened. No interruptions, no platitudes, no, "it'll happen someday" bullshit. When I finally ran out of words and just sat there sniffling into a napkin, he reached across the table and covered my hand with his. His palm was warm, rough from work, steady. "You're not broken, Clara," he said quietly. "You're just carrying more than most people ever have to. And you're still here. That's not nothing." I looked up at him then, really looked. Hazel eyes that crinkled at the corners, even when he wasn't smiling. A small scar above his left eyebrow. A face that looked like it had known its own kind of lonely. "And I can't give you kids," I blurted, like it was a confession I needed to get out before he got any ideas. He didn't flinch. "I didn't ask for kids," he said. "I asked if I could sit with you." We started seeing each other after that. Slow at first, coffee dates that turned into long walks, drives up to the ridge to watch sunsets, quiet dinners at his little rental house on the edge of town. He never once made me feel like I was missing something essential. When I'd apologize for crying on his shoulder for the 100th time, he'd just pull me closer and say, "Family isn't always blood, Clara. Sometimes it's the people who choose you when everything else falls apart. We can build our own, just you and me." 16 months later, we got married under a blanket of stars on the same ridge where we'd had our first real date. No big wedding, or no fancy dress, just us, a justice of the peace who was also a retired mechanic Evan knew from the shop, and a bottle of cheap champagne we passed back and forth while fireflies blinked in the grass. When he slipped the simple gold band on my finger, he whispered, "You're my home, always have been." The years that followed weren't perfect. There were still hard days. Anniversaries of failed treatments, holidays when the silence in our house felt too loud, moments when I'd catch myself staring at other people's children and feel the old ache rise up like a bruise I couldn't heal. But Evan never let me drown in it. He'd take my hand, pull me outside to sit on the porch swing, and remind me, "We've got each other. That's the family we fought for." He cooked terrible pancakes on Sunday mornings just to make me laugh. He learned how to braid my hair when I was too tired to do it myself after long days. He held me through nightmares and celebrated every small victory. The day I finally donated the leftover fertility meds. The day I started smiling at babies in the park again without wanting to run away. He chose love every single time, even when I was ready to give up on myself. And now, as I sit here watching machines breathe for him in that sterile ICU room, I keep coming back to those words he said in the coffee shop all those years ago. Family isn't always blood. We built ours from the wreckage. Two broken people who decided the pieces still fit together perfectly. That's why I can't let go. Not now. Not ever. Because the love we made wasn't fragile. It was forged in the hardest places. It survived every storm we threw at it. And if it could survive all of that, maybe, just maybe, it can survive this too. Even death doesn't get to win against a love like ours. Not without a fight. I couldn't stay in that room another second. Evan was asleep, or as close to sleep as the sedation would allow, his chest rising and falling in that slow mechanical way the ventilator forced. The beeps from the monitor had become white noise, but they still drilled into my skull every few seconds. I needed air, not the filtered antiseptic kind inside the ICU, but real air, even if it was just the chilly November draft blowing through the cracked window at the end of the hallway. So I slipped out, told the nurse I was going to the cafeteria for more terrible coffee. She nodded without really looking at me. They see this kind of quiet desperation every day. I walked the long corridor past the elevators, past the family waiting rooms with their sagging couches and outdated magazines, past the glassed-in nursery that used to make my heart twist, but now just felt like another reminder of what we never got. I kept moving until the hallway narrowed and the lights dimmed a little, the way they do in the older wings of the hospital. That's when I heard them. Two nurses standing at the nurses' station with their backs to me, voices low but not low enough. One was flipping through a chart, the other was leaning on the counter, sipping from a styrofoam cup. Guy in 204, seriously, he looks exactly like that bartender out in Redwood Valley. What's his name? Hayes? Noah Hayes. Same eyes, same jawline. I swear. And if they stood side by side, you'd think they were twins separated at birth. The other nurse laughed softly. You watch too many soap operas, Jen. But yeah, the resemblance is uncanny. I saw Noah at the farmer's market last weekend. Same build, same way of tilting his head when he's thinking. My feet froze to the linoleum. Redwood Valley. A mountain town maybe 3 hours north, tucked between ridges of pine and cedar. I'd driven through it once years ago on a weekend getaway with Evan. We'd stopped for gas, bought a couple of overpriced apple cider donuts, laughed about how small town everyone seemed. But we'd never mentioned family there. Evan didn't have family, not that he knew of. My heart slammed against my ribs so hard I thought they might hear it. Noah Hayes. Hayes? Same last name. And uncanny. Twins separated at birth. I pressed my back against the wall, out of sight, trying to breathe quietly while my mind raced. It could be nothing. A coincidence. People look alike all the time. But what if? What if the universe had just dropped the tiniest breadcrumb in the middle of the darkest night of my life? I didn't dare interrupt them. I just stood there until they moved on to talk about shift changes and weekend plans, their voices fading down the hall. Then I turned and walked back to Evan's room on legs that felt like they belonged to someone else. He was still out, face slack, the oxygen mask fogging faintly with each breath. I pulled the chair close and sat, staring at him, the faint freckles across his nose I used to trace with my finger, and the small scar on his chin from a childhood fall he couldn't even remember the story behind. I reached out and brushed a lock of dark hair off his forehead. His skin was cool. Too cool. I heard something, I whispered, even though he couldn't hear me. It's probably stupid. Probably nothing. But there's a man out there who looks like you. Same name, same everything. And if he could be. I swallowed hard. The words felt too big, too dangerous to say out loud. Family, a match, a chance. I didn't sleep that night. I sat there in the dim glow of the monitor lights, replaying those overheard words like a lifeline thrown into black water. Hope is a cruel thing when you've spent weeks starving for it. It flickers, fragile and bright, and you're terrified to touch it in case it burns out. But I couldn't unhear it. I couldn't unfeel the sudden, sharp stab of maybe. By the time the sky outside turned the bruised purple of pre-dawn, I'd made up my mind. I had to know. Even if it shattered me all over again, even if it was nothing. Because doing nothing meant watching him fade. And I wasn't ready to let that happen. I left at first light, told the day nurse I'd be back by evening visiting hours. She gave me a sympathetic look, the kind that said she'd seen 100 wives do desperate things. But she didn't try to stop me. I grabbed Evan's photo from the bedside table, the one taken last summer at the ridge overlook, him grinning wide in sunglasses, arms slung around my shoulders like the world was ours, and tucked it into my coat pocket next to my phone and the last few dollars in cash I had. The drive north took me out of the city. I passed strip malls and warehouses until the highway narrowed and the pines closed in. Redwood Valley sits high enough that the air changes, crisper, smelling of sap and wet earth even in late fall. The road wound through switchbacks, sunlight slanting through the trees in golden bars across the asphalt. Every curve felt like it was pulling me toward something I couldn't name yet. My hands shook on the wheel the whole way. Hope and terror tangled so tight I couldn't tell them apart. What if this Noah Hayes was just a guy who looked like Evan? What if he laughed in my face? What if he said, "Lady, you've got the wrong person," and I had to drive back empty-handed, back to the hospital bed and the beeping machines and the slow goodbye? But what if he wasn't just a look-alike? And what if blood really did call to blood the way people say it does? I found the bar easier than I expected. It sat right on the main drag. Hayes's Tavern, hand-painted signs swinging above the door, warm yellow light spilling onto the sidewalk even though it was barely past noon. A couple of pickup trucks were parked out front, engines still ticking as they cooled. I sat in my car for a long minute, staring at the door, heart hammering so loud it drowned out the radio. Then I got out. Legs unsteady. Photo clutched in my fist like a talisman. The door jingled when I pushed it open. Inside smelled like wood polish, old beer, and something faintly smoky. Maybe the fireplace in the corner. A few locals looked up from their stools, curious but not unfriendly. Behind the bar stood a man wiping down glasses with a rag, and the world tilted. And he was Evan, not a little like him, not similar in passing. He was Evan, same height, same broad shoulders, same dark hair falling just over the brow, same hazel eyes that flicked up and locked on mine. The same small tilt to the head when he was trying to place a face. Even the way he set the glass down, careful, deliberate, was the same. I couldn't speak for a second. My mouth opened, closed. Tears burned the backs of my eyes. He frowned, concern creasing his forehead. "You okay, ma'am? You look like you've seen a ghost." I stepped forward on legs that barely held me, pulled the photo from my pocket with trembling fingers, and slid it across the scarred wooden bar. "I'm Clara Hayes," I said, voice cracking. "This is my husband, Evan. He's dying. And I just heard someone said you look like him. Exactly like him. Your name is Noah Hayes?" He stared at the photo, then at me, then back at the photo. The rag slipped from his hand and dropped to the floor. "Holy shit," he whispered. And in that single moment, everything shifted. The desperate drive, the overheard whisper, the impossible hope. It wasn't nothing anymore. It was everything. The second Noah stepped out from behind the bar, wiping his hands on a dish towel, sleeves rolled to his elbows, I nearly collapsed right there on the worn hardwood floor. It wasn't just resemblance, it was recognition. He had Evan's eyes, deep hazel flecked with green, the kind that crinkle at the corners when he smiles, like they're holding back a secret joke. Same strong jaw, same faint shadow of stubble that Evan always let grow a little too long on weekends. Even the way he moved, long strides. And shoulders relaxed but purposeful, a slight roll in his gait from years of standing behind counters or working with his hands. It was like watching Evan walk toward me in a dream I hadn't dared to have. He stopped a few feet away, towel still in hand, and tilted his head the exact way Evan did when he was trying to read my mood. "Hey," he said, voice low and warm, the faintest mountain drawl softening the edges. "You okay? You look like you just saw a ghost." I opened my mouth, but nothing came out at first. My throat closed tight around the words I'd rehearsed the whole drive up. Instead, I just held out the photo again, hand shaking so badly the edges fluttered. He took it, looked down. His breath caught, sharp, audible. The color drained from his face in a slow wave, then rushed back. He stared at Evan's smile in the picture like he was staring into a mirror he didn't know existed. I forced the words out, raw and ragged. "That's my husband, Evan Hayes. He's in the hospital, dying. Aplastic anemia. His bone marrow is failing. We need a stem cell donor, a match." And I overheard nurses saying, "You look exactly like him. Your name is Noah Hayes." I drove 3 hours straight because what if... I couldn't finish. Tears were already spilling over. Noah didn't interrupt. He just kept staring at the photo, thumb brushing absently over Evan's face like he could feel the warmth through the paper. When he finally looked up at me, his eyes were glassy. "I grew up in foster care," he said quietly. "Car accident when I was little. Parents didn't make it. No siblings on record. They told me I was alone." He swallowed hard. "But I've always felt like something was missing. Like there was someone out there I was supposed to know." He handed the photo back carefully, like it was made of glass. "If he's my brother, we need to know for sure. I'll get tested, right now, today. Whatever it takes." I searched his face for hesitation, for doubt, for any sign this was too much to ask of a stranger. There was none, just quiet certainty. And in that moment, standing in the middle of a half-empty bar with country music playing low on the jukebox, something ancient clicked into place. Not paperwork, not DNA results yet. Something deeper. Blood knows blood, even when the world has tried to erase the connection. I nodded, tears streaming freely now. "Thank you," I whispered. Thank you for even listening." He gave me a small, crooked smile, the same one Evan used when he was trying to be brave for me. "Don't thank me yet," he said. "Let's go find out if I can save him." The test results came faster than I thought possible. 2 days of waiting that felt like 2 years. Pacing hospital hallways, sitting vigil by Evan's bed, jumping every time my phone buzzed. Noah drove down the morning the lab called. He walked into the transplant coordinator's office with me, shoulders squared, hands shoved deep in his jacket pockets like he was bracing for a punch he refused to dodge. Dr. Patel spread the HLA typing report across the desk. "Full sibling match," she said simply. 10 out of 10 markers. Perfect. Noah exhaled, a long, shaky breath that sounded like relief and grief all at once. And I burst into tears right there in the room. Not quiet tears, ugly, heaving sobs that shook my whole body. Noah reached over and gripped my shoulder, firm, steady, the way Evan always did when the world felt too heavy. "I'll donate," he said before anyone could ask. "Whatever it takes, bone marrow, peripheral blood stem cells, doesn't matter. He's my brother. I'm not losing him before I even get to know him." No hesitation, no questions about risks, recovery time, what it would cost him. Just yes. Like it was the most obvious thing in the world. Later, after the paperwork was signed and the doctors had explained the procedure in careful detail, Noah and I stood outside in the cold parking lot of St. Aurora. The sky was the color of old steel, promising snow. I turned to him, my husband's mirror image, my unexpected lifeline, and threw my arms around him without thinking. He stiffened for half a second, surprised, then wrapped his arms around me tight. Strong, safe, familiar in a way that made my heart ache. "Thank you," I sobbed into his shoulder. "You didn't have to do this. You could have walked away." He pulled back just enough to look at me, eyes shining. "I've spent 30 years thinking I had no one," he said. "No family, no roots. Turns out I had a little brother the whole time, and he needs me. How the hell could I walk away from that?" The abandonment he'd carried since childhood, the empty spaces where parents and siblings should have been, hadn't turned him bitter. It had made him hungry for connection, made him recognize it the second it appeared. I hugged him again, harder this time, and the deadlock that had been crushing us for weeks cracked open. Hope, real, tangible hope, flooded in like sunlight after endless rain. Noah Hayes wasn't just a donor, he was a brother, strong, unwavering, choosing family without a second thought. And for the first time since Evan got sick, I believed we might actually win this fight. The morning of the transplant dawned cold and clear, the kind of winter day where the sky looks washed clean and everything feels possible again. I barely slept the night before. I kept waking up every hour, checking the clock, imagining every possible thing that could go wrong. But Noah, he slept like a man who'd already made peace with whatever came next. He showed up at St. Aurora at 6 a.m. sharp, wearing the same faded denim jacket he'd had on when we first met, and carrying nothing but a small duffel and that quiet, unshakable certainty of his. They took him back first. Peripheral blood stem cell collection, no surgery, just a long session hooked up to a machine that spun his blood, pulled out the stem cells, and returned the rest. He joked with the nurses the whole time, asked about their kids, told them bad dad jokes that made them groan and laugh at the same time. When they wheeled him out afterward, he looked pale but grinned at me through the window of the recovery room and gave me a thumbs up. "Piece of cake," he mouthed. "Tell my little brother I'm coming for him." Evan was already prepped in the sterile isolation room, chemo the week before to wipe out what was left of his diseased marrow, IVs running wide open, monitors beeping their steady rhythm. I wasn't allowed in during the actual infusion. Infection risk was too high. So I waited in the family lounge down the hall, knees bouncing, hands clasped so tight my nails left half moons in my palms. The transplant coordinator came out every hour with updates. Infusion started. Cells are going in smoothly. No complications so far. Each report felt like a small breath I could finally take. It took 4 hours. 4 hours for Noah's cells, his blood, his bone marrow's future, to travel through tubes and into Evan's body. 4 hours for the miracle we'd begged for to actually begin. When they finally let me back in, Evan looked the same. Still pale, still fragile, still wired to machines. But something had shifted in the air. The room felt lighter, like hope had taken up physical space between us. The real change came slowly, on day by careful day, day 3. His fever broke. The low-grade one that had haunted him for weeks finally dropped, and the nurses smiled wider when they checked his chart. Day 5. Color crept back into his cheeks. Not the ashen gray I'd grown used to, but a faint pink, like life remembering how to paint him again. Day 7. He opened his eyes fully for the first time without the haze of heavy sedation. They found mine across the room, and his cracked lips moved. "Clara?" Just my name. But it was his voice, weak, hoarse from the breathing tube they'd pulled earlier that morning, but unmistakably his. I crossed the room in 2 steps, sat on the edge of the bed, and took his hand. It still felt cool, but warmer than it had in weeks. His fingers curled weakly around mine. "I'm here," I whispered. "Yeah, I'm right here." He drifted in and out after that, exhaustion pulling him under, but each time he surfaced, he stayed a little longer. The doctors kept saying the same thing. Engraftment is happening. Counts are trending up. White cells first, then platelets, red cells lagging but climbing. Numbers on a chart that meant everything. One afternoon, maybe 10 days in, I was sitting beside him reading aloud from an old paperback Western he used to love, the one with the dog-eared pages and coffee stains, when he let out a small, raspy chuckle at something the hero said. It was the weakest laugh imaginable. It was the most beautiful sound I'd ever heard. I set the book down and looked at him. His eyes were clearer now, tired but bright. "Tell me again," he said softly. "About Noah." So I did. And I told him everything, from the overheard whisper in the hallway, to the drive up through the pines, to walking into that bar and seeing a man who could have been his reflection. I told him how Noah didn't hesitate, how he'd driven down without a second thought, how he'd sat in that little office and said, "He's my brother. I'm in." I told him about the hug in the parking lot, the way Noah's arms felt strong and familiar, like family we didn't know we'd been missing. Evan listened, eyes shining. A tear slipped down his temple into the pillow. "You found him," he whispered. "You found my brother." I leaned down and kissed his forehead, careful of the IV lines, careful of everything fragile. "I found family for us," I said against his skin. "For all of us." The days stretched into weeks. The rhythm of the hospital slowed. No more crashing alarms in the middle of the night. No more frantic pages for the crash cart. Visitors were still limited, but Noah came every few days when he could get away from the bar. He'd sit on the other side of the bed, telling Evan stories about Redwood Valley, about the time he rebuilt a '67 Mustang from rust, about how he always felt like he was waiting for someone without knowing who. Evan listened, smiled, asked questions in that quiet voice that was slowly getting stronger. I watched them, two men who looked like mirror images now filling in each other's blank spaces, and something inside me unclenched for the first time in months. Life was coming back, not in a rush, not in fireworks, in small, steady breaths, in weak laughs that grew steadier, or in hands that squeezed back with real strength, in the slow return of color, of appetite, of tomorrow. It wasn't magic in the fairy tale sense. It was better. It was blood, literal, donated, life-giving blood, mixed with the kind of love that drives 3 hours on a hunch, that says yes without asking what it costs, that refuses to let go even when the doctors say there's no hope left. A real miracle, the kind that leaves scars, the kind that stays. It's been 8 months since the transplant, and some mornings I still wake up holding my breath, waiting for the other shoe to drop. But it doesn't. Evan is here, really here. He's not the same man who used to lift me onto the kitchen counter just to steal a kiss. He moves slower, tires faster, has to pace himself on the stairs. But he's alive. His laugh is back, that deep, eye-rolling sound that starts in his chest and fills every room he's in. His color is good again. The hollows under his eyes have filled in, and when the sun hits his face, you can see the faint freckles across his nose that only show up in summer light. He's put on weight, enough that his old flannel shirts don't hang off him like they're borrowed anymore. Enough that when he wraps his arms around me from behind while I'm making coffee, I feel the solid warmth of him instead of fragile bones. And then there's Noah. He sold a stake in the bar last spring so he could cut back his hours and spend more time with us. Now he drives down every couple of weeks, or we go up to Redwood Valley. The three of us have fallen into this easy rhythm that feels like it's always been waiting for us to find it. A Noah brings bad barbecue from the pit master down the street from his place. Evan fires up the grill in our backyard, and I make the potato salad the way my mom used to. Too much mustard, just enough dill. We sit out on the porch until the stars come out, passing a bottle of bourbon back and forth, talking about nothing and everything. Last weekend, we went up to Redwood Valley for the whole long weekend. Noah's place is a small cabin-style house just outside town, perched on a hill with a view of the pines stretching out forever. We arrived Friday evening as the sun was dipping behind the ridge, painting everything gold and pink. Evan stepped out of the truck, took a deep breath of that crisp mountain air, and just stood there for a long minute with his eyes closed. "Feels like coming home," he said quietly. Noah clapped him on the shoulder, gentle, careful, the way he always is with Evan now. "It is home, little brother." That night we built a fire in the stone pit out back. The crackle of pine logs, the smell of smoke and sap, the way the sparks drifted up into the black sky like tiny stars falling the wrong direction. We sat in Adirondack chairs with blankets over our laps, beers sweating in our hands. Evan told stories about our early days, how we met in that rainy coffee shop, How he knew after the first real conversation that I was it for him. Noah listened, grinning, asking questions like he was catching up on 30 lost years. Then Noah told his own stories, the foster homes, the way he'd always kept a spot at the bar open, just in case. The nights he'd stare at the ceiling, wondering why he felt like half of him was missing. At one point, Evan reached over and gripped Noah's forearm. "You saved my life," he said, voice rough. "But more than that, you gave me a brother. I never thought I'd have that." Noah looked down at the fire for a second, throat working. "I was supposed to be the big brother," he said finally. "I just showed up late." Evan laughed softly. Better late than never. I watched them, two men who looked so much alike it still startled me sometimes, and felt something settle deep in my chest. A quiet that wasn't empty. A fullness I hadn't known I was missing until it arrived. Later, when Noah went inside to grab another round, Evan pulled me onto his lap in the big chair. The fire popped and hissed. His arms came around me, strong again, steady. He rested his chin on my shoulder and spoke low, just for me. "Family isn't just where you're born, Clara," he murmured. "It's where you find each other, where you choose each other, over and over." I turned my face into his neck, breathing him in. Clean soap, wood smoke, the faint trace of motor oil that never quite leaves his skin. "We did good," I whispered. "Yeah," he said, pressing a kiss to my temple. "We did real good." The weekend ended the way good ones do. Slow goodbyes, promises to do it again soon, hugs that lingered a little longer than they used to. Noah stood on his porch waving as we pulled out, and Evan kept his hand on the horn in 3 short bursts, the same signal he and Noah had started using, their own little code for "see you soon." Driving home through the winding roads, pines blurring past the windows, Evan reached over and laced his fingers through mine. "We're not missing anything anymore," he said. I squeezed his hand. "No," I answered, "we're not." The story doesn't end with fireworks or grand declarations. It ends with ordinary days that feel extraordinary because we almost lost them. It ends with lazy Sunday mornings, shared meals, inside jokes that only the 3 of us understand. It ends with love that was tested in fire and came out stronger. Love between a husband and wife who chose each other every day, and a brother who chose to show up when it mattered most. We made it through. We found each other. And now, in the quiet spaces between heartbeats, there's no more emptiness. Just us. Whole. Home.